Let me ask you something. Are you getting everything out of your rent-to-own business? If you're not an APRO member, then the answer is probably no. Look, advocacy is APRO's bread and butter. This is why they were created and what they do best. But here's the thing. APRO membership is about way more than advocacy. APRO connects you to the movers and the shakers of the industry, people who've been there, done that, and they can help you do it even better. APRO's monthly webinars give you expert insights and actionable takeaways. It's like having a masterclass for your business every single month. Got questions about complex regulations or sticky situations? No problem. APRO's legal hotline gives you direct access to experts who have got the answers. That's a peace of mind that you can't put a price on. And let's not forget the resources, news, updates, and tools that keep you ahead of the curve. Scholarships for your team? Check. Disaster relief when you need it most? Double check. APRO is your ultimate support system in the rent-to-own world. So stop settling for less. With APRO, members get more. More support, more connections, and more success. Head over to rtohq.org and join the APRO family today. Because in this business, more isn't just better. It's essential. See you at the top with APRO. Hello, and welcome to the RTO Show. I'm your host, Pete Shau, and today I have the pleasure of talking to another one of RTO legends, somebody who's done a lot in this industry, Kevin Quinn, all the way from Washington. Thank you so much, Kevin, for being here today. How is everything going over there in Washington?
Fantastic. Absolutely perfect.
Good. Love to hear it.
Everything's fine.
Has the summer been good? Because now that we're going into the fall and everything, how's the weather?
Yeah, summer's really good out here. We're now in what we call Indian summer. We have days here, though, that sometimes are a little hazy because of forest fire smoke that comes out of Canada and other parts of northern Washington. But today's a gorgeous day. Yeah.
Well, I can tell you what, in Florida, it's always hot and muggy. But I love it. I wouldn't change it for anything in the world.
Here, so it's nice.
I need to be where you are.
Yeah.
So, one of the reasons that we're talking to Kevin Quinn, one of the reasons that we have him on the series as a legend is because you got started in rent-to-own a while ago. And not only that, you were a huge part of APRO, showing just how important it is to be in a group, to be in an advocacy, to do what we can for this industry, and then kind of doing it yourself. So let's go back to the beginning. What got you in rent-to-own? When you started, rent-to-own wasn't what it is now. Rent-to-own is almost like a household name now, but back then you guys were pioneering your way through this. When did you get started at rent-to-own, and what made you decide rent-to-own is where I want to be?
Well, in 1981, late 81, my brother was a CPA in Tacoma, Washington, and he had two clients that owned a upstart rent-to-own company in Tacoma. And he gave me a phone call and asked me if I wanted to. I was selling cars at the time here in Central Washington, Moses Lake, and wanted to know if I wanted to come and get into this rent-to-own business in Tacoma. And I said, sure, I'll come and talk to these guys. So my wife and I had a meeting with them in January. First part of January, they decided to sell us a franchise, and the franchise they sold us was their seventh store, number 7 in their chain. And I was the first one, and I was 24 years old, didn't know anything about television stereos or anything like that. And anyways, I packed up and left selling cars and moved in with my brother and his wife and worked for these guys for about a month or two in one of their stores to learn the business. And we opened our first store in March of 1982.
Now, was this Quality Rentals?
No, it was called Primetime Rentals at that time. And at that time when we opened, the industry, those two gentlemen found out about the industry of going to an APRO convention that was down in Texas. And they met a gentleman that was a large dealer in Austin, who kind of led them along and got them introduced to who the finance arms were at that time, and so on and so forth. And they brought it back to the state of Washington. So it was really brand new. In fact, the products we only handled televisions and appliances and stereo equipment. And stereo equipment was still rack stereos, those ones that you put in the stands and everything like that. And VHS VCRs were just coming out onto the market. In fact, our very first VCR that we ever had in our store had a based cost to us as a wholesale cost of $499.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
How far have we come, right? I don't even know. My daughter doesn't even know what a VCR looks like right now. Right. She probably wouldn't even know how to use it, let alone be able to say that that's an actual VCR, right? Yeah. So we start in January of 81. We start kind of going down this road. We figure out what we're going to do.
Yeah, that was 82.
This is 82. Okay. So prime time comes along. How many stores did you actually start after that?
Well, we only started one store in 1982. We limped along, and in March of 1984, I came back from a APRO conference in San Diego, and that was put on by some of the old original leaders of APRO at that time. Our president at that time was a guy named Barry Gambini. And Ed Wynn, who you've heard that name numerous times, he was very involved in that thing. In fact, my very first APRO meeting, if I back up a little bit, my very first APRO meeting and meeting Ed and people like Chuck Sims, who owned Remco Rentals, and the Growls. They were dealers in the central United States and Wyoming. A gentleman named Curtis Piercy in California. His son Les had stores in California. Anyways, met these guys in May of 1982. And anyway, so because of that, that's how I got connected with APRO through this franchise. And I went to this meeting very early on. And at that meeting in 82, I found out through Chuck Sims, the whole basis was how to build a company. I didn't know anything. I mean, I'm 24 years old. This is just winging it by a prayer, right? So he gave us a lot of basis of how to build a corporate philosophy and a strategic plan for the future, and so on and so forth. So fast forward back to what I was talking about in San Diego in 84, in the spring of 84, I came back from that meeting, and when I did come back from that meeting, my brother, who was the CPA who helped get me into the business, was tired of dealing with being an accountant in front of the IRS, and he wanted to get in the business. And I didn't have enough money to start my second store. He did. But I had the rights for an area for a second store, and I had the knowledge. He didn't have the knowledge. He didn't have the rights. So we became partners in 1984, opened our second store. And our third store we opened in October of 1984. So times went on from there, and that partnership broke up after about 2 years.
Why is that?
More brother stuff than anything else. I was very young at that time, and we just had a disagreement of what I thought the program was and what he thought the program was of the partnership. So when we split up, he took 2 of the stores and I took 2 of the stores. So, and we did it amenably. I was still very good friends and loving brother with my brother at that time, but it was not easy. It's not easy doing that. Yeah.
Well, it is, sometimes just having a partner is hard. Having a partner and family, sometimes it just, you have your differences of opinion, and sometimes it's better just to keep it that way. Sometimes they can work through it.
He explained it the best way. If you got a partner, you have another wife. That's the reality. So it's and God love my wife that I've had for 46 years, but
congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. But partners, again, I'm at that time I was 26, so I'm young, and he had certain ideas and I had others, and I was the salesman and he was more of the financial side or
the back end
money side of that, and I was learning.
So how do we get from being 24, kind of getting into it, learning from these meetings, expanding, to taking that and going all the way to being president of APRO between 93 and 95? That's a big jump.
So if we go back to that, so in 86, I split the partnership up. And you have to understand it in this franchise group, by May of 1988, we had 6 franchisee owners besides the franchisors. And those 6 franchisees owned a combination of 6 stores independently of the franchise. And in May of 1988, the franchisor got an offer from Rent-A-Center to sell. And they were pretty bound and determined that they figured that we would sell to Rent-A-Center. And we decided not to. And so this group, the 6 of us, came together, and they put me as the head speaker of the group. And I had to be in the middle of the negotiations with Rent-A-Center as the sale was going down, because I also had one store that was involved in the sale because I was partners with these franchisees or franchisors. And so I had to be in the middle of the meetings anyways. And I had to work with Rent-A-Center to allow us to break away and to allow us to still grow and have a company up here in the state of Washington. So anyways, we were able to do that. And as we did that, then the 6 of us decided, okay, we're going to create our own company called Quality Rentals. And that name Quality Rentals was a separate corporation name that licensed back the rights to do business with that name Quality Rentals to these 6 individual owners. So we ended up being like the franchisors and the franchisees of our own company, if you can follow that. I was named president of that franchisor group, and we did it because we had 12 stores that had buying power for 12 stores. And at that time, still early in the industry, we had no bank financing. So we had to get Transamerica, who was the main lending arm, to agree to lend us as a group the amount of money we needed to have to continue buying and so on and so forth. And so we ended up having to cross guarantee one another. You think that, talk about something interesting. You're guaranteeing the guy next across the table from you that he's not going to spend all of his money on boats and cars and stuff and make you go bankrupt because of him. So anyways, it worked for the time being. And it was a big deal in an aspect of getting us to survive.
What was the bank? Why were the banks not as lend friendly as they are now? And I'm not going to say that they're lend friendly a lot now. They are still a little bit RTO averse, but back then, like you said, there really wasn't anybody, in the rent to own business to say, there were people here and there were people there, and it was very sporadic in that time frame as opposed to now. What was keeping the banks back and just holding them back and saying, I really don't even know if I want to get into this, and kind of making you go through so many hoops at that particular point in time?
Well, put yourself in the banker's position. I'm going to come and I'm going to borrow money from you to buy a bunch of televisions that I'm going to give to somebody for a $20 bill for a weekly payment. And the information I'm taking has nothing to do with their credit history. It only has to do with who they are personally, where they work, the people they know. And I'm betting on the come that you're going to pay me another $20 next week. And if you don't, you stole my $300 television that I paid for, and you only gave me $20. And the bank lent us the $300. So where's their collateral? We were not a conditional sales contract. There was no meat in the game for the banks. So and as we go along, I'll explain to you how we got to that. But that's the reason why we didn't have any bank finance. I don't blame the banks. I mean, anybody with half a brain at that time probably wouldn't have given us any money at that time. And it was probably the right thing to do, because there was, and I don't want to talk ill of our industry, but but if there was a time during the 80s, especially the early and mid 80s and so on and so forth, there was a lot of people that were in the business that were probably, they were in it for a quick buck. They weren't in it for a long term. And, people like myself, I was in it to create a family business, and two different types of looking at things. And so that's why, and that's part of the reason why the lenders that we had eventually said, we can't do this anymore, because they were starting to have too many defaults because of it. So,
well, during that time frame also, I mean, going over some legends, I did hear that there were some speed bumps in the road back in the day because of the fact that some of the vendors also didn't recognize rent to own as the same way kind of banks did. We don't really understand giving you guys these lines of credit with, let's say, televisions and washer and dryers or furniture. And I know you said in the beginning you guys did, electronics and appliances. What were some of the things that you had to overcome in that regard? Because now, not only did you have to overcome the banking, now you've got to convince the vendors that you're going to get their stuff back and you're going to be able to pay for it, on either a net 30 or whatever the case is, right, and keep doing it.
Well, here's back. If you went back into the 80s, again, going back to that time frame, the big names in electronics were names like Sony, for instance. The Sony television was the Cadillac of televisions. And Sony wouldn't look at us. I mean, we were the ugly stepchild across the street. We're just, if I see Sony televisions in a rent to own store, I mean, this is the ghettos of retail as they would look at it. It was like if you were, put it together in today's life, not all jewelers can handle Rolexes. They're not allowed to. I mean, Rolex is being very, so that's really who we were. And we had to prove who we were. Well, again, like I said, during that time, we still had a fair amount of people that really weren't the most scrupulous at times. And I'm willing to admit that. I mean, it's just, we didn't have a good reputation. That's exactly what I'll say. Our customers loved us, but the outside world thought we were somebody different. So that was a problem when it came to, in both cases, products and in financing. And we had to go through some major changes as an industry and look at ourselves in the mirror and say, who the hell are we really? What are we trying to accomplish here? And how are we going to change that to change the public image of business-wise, not the consumer, because the consumer was still coming to us. It would have been the people that we're going to have to deal with on the outside, whether it be banks, vendors, lawyers, so on and so forth. Anybody that would be that way.
So I'm doing a little math here. I'm doing a little math in my head. You said 46 years you've been married to your wife. That means that in the year 80 or 79, you got married and she's kind of been with you through this entire ride?
Yeah.
So when you're doing this and you're going into this like uncharted territory, you're going into rent to own and you guys are kind of blazing your way. What did she think of all this?
If it wasn't for her, to be honest with you, I wouldn't have been in the business. Her and I together made the decision. Our oldest daughter, who is now 44, and she actually, her and her little sister run a R&R Tire Express and custom wheel store that we owned and that they bought from us after we sold our traditional rent-to-own stores. But she was 6 months old at the time that we opened our first store. So there was numerous times when, if we ate lunch, we had a negative cash flow day in the store. So I was about ready to pack up and run and go home, that being back here to Moses Lake. And she said, no, we're in this for the long run. You're not going anywhere. So her steadfastness and kicking me in the butt was probably, has been the biggest thing. And then, and then again, as time's gone and we gotten past this sale of the franchisor group and became Quality Rentals, that was very trying because I was put on notice. I mean, I was the spokesman for all these guys and their stores. And so there was a lot of stress there, but my wife, held it all together and everything else. And at that particular time is when I became more, I would say more visual involved with APRO. I was not just a dealer then. In 1991, I think it was. In 1991, I became a board member. I did not get elected to the board the first time I ran, but one of the board members could not follow through with their membership, their obligation, and I was the second highest person getting votes, so I was brought onto the board. And during that time, was our president was a guy named Ted Wilson. Wayne Chambers was our first vice president, and we were going through the process at that time of rebuilding APRO itself. APRO was starting to fall apart, and our executive director, Bill Keith, was just being hired as Ted Wilson came on. So a lot of people were running away from APRO at that time. So we were trying to build this structure of, get these dealers together. And so anyways, that's where that led to. And then in I guess that would have been in 90. So the 91 or 92, as being on the board, I was, or just during that time was the first time I was awarded one of our awards at APRO as being the Rental Dealer of the Year. I guess. Yeah,
so it was 1992.
Well, I don't know. I was. A lot of people say I Quinn people. As you could tell, I talk a lot, and my voice is fairly loud, and so I was the little short guy that just made a lot of noise, I guess, and people liked the way I made noise. So anyways, and I did some things, and so got involved with our state, got our state association built, got our state got their first law for regulating our industry during that time. And so I guess that's why I got the award. But anyways, it was
in the early 90s. It was in the early 90s that you were able to help establish a law in Washington State.
Yeah, that's one of the things we were doing in the very early 90s is we had tried to go to the federal government years ago in the 80s and try to get federal legislation. Well, that's just, it's a battle that's not going to happen. And so Ed Wynn came up with the concept of, let's go at this thing on a state-by-state basis. And it's much easier dealing with state legislators than federal legislators. And so at that particular point, we started passing good, comprehensive laws that protected our industry, but also protected the consumers. And, I think, I don't know, when we left, there's 48 states in the union that have good laws, I think, at this time, something like that. And that's how that all came about. Yeah.
It's good to say that you were a part of that. Anytime that somebody can say in the industry, I helped keep the regulation for our industry in check so that we can actually do what it is that we need to do to be successful. Congratulations and kudos to you.
Well, here's something that will give you a kind of a time capsule of something. The champion of our bill in the state of Washington was at that time State Senator Patty Murray. I don't know if you know that name, but Patty Murray is the third strongest person in the Senate, in the United States Senate on Washington, D.C. now. So if you see Schumer talking about the shutdown today, you'll see a little short blonde gal next to him. That's Patty Murray, and I've known her since 1991 or 2. Yeah.
That's excellent. That's excellent. So 91, things are kind of getting back in. You get with Cleese and you're trying to get everything back together. 92, you're recognized as Rental Dealer of the Year. 93 to 95, you actually became president of APRO. So somebody must have liked your voice a whole lot to really make that happen. You must have been doing something right. Can you describe to me what it was like to start from this industry, not really knowing what it's like, to actually helping run one of the largest advocacy agencies that we have as far as APRO is concerned in the industry?
Well, first of all, it was a shock. I was just a typical board member. And during that time, we had an executive committee, and the executive committee of the board, you worked your way through the process, and always the first vice president of the executive committee on the board was the heir apparent to be the next president. That's just kind of how it worked. And the heir apparent at that time had some personal issues that were not going to allow him to be president. And so at a conference in the Dominican Republic for APRO, I was approached by, again, Ted Wilson, an ex-president, Wayne Chambers, the current president, and Bill Keese, the executive director, about becoming president of APRO. And again, you've asked me about my wife. This is a big deal about it. They made sure that she was at the meeting. And I'm the ripe old age of, I think, 34 years old at this time. I know I was in my early 30s. And there was a lot of other people on that board that were much older than I am and had been in the industry longer than I am. And they said, no, you're the one. You're the one that needs to be the one to take this helm. And so my wife and I spent that whole conference, which was 3 days, debating on whether we should say yes or no. We decided to say yes the last day, and I'll never forget this. That evening, we were at a function, and Ed Wynn came in with Bill Keese and said to me, well, Mr. President, guess what? And I said, what's that? He said, the chairman of the House Banking Committee, Henry B. Gonzalez, is going to have a hearing on our industry on Wednesday, and it's not going to be pretty. And so, welcome to the fire. And I went, basically, I don't know, what the crap did I get myself into?
Now, if anybody doesn't know, the Henry B. Gonzalez issue that came up was, somebody in the government decided that they really wanted to take toll on rent to own and shut it down. So how
Correct.
Involved were you in the Henry B. Gonzalez situation, and what steps did you take? Now you're in the fray now. Somebody says, and I love Edwin. He's a friend of the show. I love him to death. Every time somebody comes up and every time I talk about a legend, Edwin's name is involved in that sentence because he has been there for everything. So
Correct.
Edwin, please come in. They're talking to you and you just say, you know what? Hey, this is happening. What did you do? Obviously we got to get back to the States. We got to get our wits about us. And then in a couple of days, we're going to end up finding out what's really happening as far as how they wanted to dismantle the rent-to-own industry. How did you turn it around? What did you do to get prepped for that situation?
Well, first and foremost, we went through, of course, a hearing that was just ugly. And again, time capsule-wise, let's go back to time capsule-wise. Here's some time capsules. Sitting on Henry B. Gonzalez's committee, the sub-chairman of the committee was Robert Kennedy, Mr. Maha.
Wow.
Okay. Other people that sat on that committee was a congressman that's still there. His name is Luis Gonzalez out of Texas. And somebody you see on TV a lot, Maxine Waters. And they did not like us. They called us every name in the book, in fact. So,
wow.
We, as far as they were concerned, we were stealing money. We were stealing from poor people, period. That was their opinion of us. And as I had said earlier, we had a bad image. We created it ourselves. Our industry created it. So we were in the process of trying to clean this up, but now all of a sudden this comes upon us. So as I became president, our convention that year was in Orlando, Florida. We had some rooms that didn't cost us anything. And so I called a strategic planning meeting to put together a tax situation and how we're going to go about this. And it was coming from all ends. You have to understand, because of the hearing, we had the legislators that were after us. Every television, radio station, every media market was attacking us. At the same time that was going on, the Internal Revenue Service was attacking us, and that's a total separate entity that if they'd have gotten done what they wanted to do, they would have bankrupted the industry. So we had really like a three-front war going on. So we flew to Orlando, and I requested people to be there that I thought very highly of, one being Ed, but another one, again, I've talked about him before, is Chuck Sims. He's a great orator. He's a great facilitator to put a strategic planning meeting together. And so Ted Wilson was there. People like Daryl Tissett was there, Dick Eichlin, Bill Keese. I think Bill White was there. Rich Bartell, I think, was there. There was a bunch of us, and we spent 3 days there, and we put a strategic planning group together. I know, and I know that Wayne Chambers was there. We put a plan together of how we were going to attack this, and we from there we came out with how we're going to approach the legislature. Then we hired a public relations group to deal with our image problem. And we also, at the same time, hired a very high-powered attorney group in Washington, D.C. that was going to attack the IRS. And in fact, our head litigator in that attorney group was retired Superior Tax Court Judge Samuel Sterritt. And so we had some high-powered hitters that were on our hands. We hired, of course, a lobbyist group in Washington, D.C. His name was John Raffaelli. And Raff had pros and cons, and we had a lot of battles with a lot of different dealers. As you can tell, most dealers are Republicans, and John is a Democrat. But this was during the Clinton administration, so it made more sense to have somebody like that knew where, as I could put it, the bodies are buried and where we could go. So that's how the whole thing was put together. Was it trying? Oh, yeah. I mean, I was on radio shows and television shows like I can't believe. I remember going to a board meeting on Austin, Texas, and after the board meeting was done, Ron Waters, who was our head legislative guy that worked hand in hand with Ed Wynn, said, what are you doing now? And he said, well, I'm going to get on an airplane and go back to Seattle. And he said, no, you're not. You and I are flying to Washington, D.C. tonight. We have a meeting with the Speaker of the House of Representatives tomorrow morning, who just happened to be Tom Foley from the state of Washington at that time.
Wow.
And this is my first time to be in front of a legislator. And anyway, so that's how the ball ran. And so it was a wild and crazy time. And
Kevin, I'm going to say,
very scary.
You handle it like a pro. I mean, you're talking about things that right now, even as we speak, I'm just, oh my God, the Henry B. Gonzalez thing was huge. Now, I did hear about the IRS before, about some of the things that they wanted to do, but can you explain to me, as this was going on, what is it exactly the IRS was trying to implement that would have really made some big changes to the rent-to-own industry and possibly put us out altogether?
The biggest thing is that the Internal Revenue Service wanted to define us as a disguised credit sale, not a lease. And so the difference between a conditional contract credit sale is that if I was to sell you a television and put it on payments for you, I have to claim all the income for the total contract up front and then write off the cost of the product. Okay? That's how that works tax purposes wise. Well, in rent to own, that would not work because
not even close.
Because these people don't have they have no obligation to keep it. They could give it back at any time, and it made no sense. So we always called it a lease or a rental, and we took the inventory and depreciated it. Otherwise, wrote off a certain amount per month to write off the inventory itself until the contract was fully taken up, or whoever actually owned that product at the end came. Then the rest of the value of that product would be written off on the books. So what we were looking at was somewhere between a $1 to $2 billion problem, tax problem wise, and it would have put us out of business. There's no other way around it.
Right.
So what had happened is a dealer in Indiana, the name of the dealer was Rarix, was found guilty of this disguised credit sale under the eyes of the Internal Revenue Service. And we asked this dealer if he would be the guinea pig so that we could take and file a suit in Superior Court tax suit to go against the Internal Revenue Service. And they gracefully said yes. So we put together, and to do all this, you have to understand something. Prior to this, we already knew that prior to all this crap happening, we knew we had to do some of this stuff. And we had an old fund that was called the LDIF fund. It was called the Legal Defense Initiative Fund. And so that was one of the things I did before I was president. I went in front of everybody at APRO and said, all we need from you is one VCR, the cost of a VCR per store. Just cut us that check, and this will fund this, okay? So we had to keep doing this, raising money to keep, this, for instance, I remember Ed talking to us, we'd sit down and talk about, Ed Wynn would talk to us about the bills that we would get from this attorney group in Washington, D.C., and he said, boy, I wish I knew how to charge people like these they do. But anyways, so so the long and the short of it is that we had to keep the money thing going together. We had to keep the dealers together to not freak out and run away. And we had to do this. And then also the bad press on the other side, we had to get our customers to go, this isn't happening with you, is it? And how we did that is once we explained it, especially our customers, we explained that to them. We ended up getting petitions in stores to tell our congressman that we came in with stacks of petitions to take to our congressman and say, this is what our customers think of us. You're telling us that they don't know what the hell they're doing. Yes, they do.
But they do
know exactly what they're doing. But anyways, back to the IRS thing. That's why the Internal Revenue Service was such a big deal. We would have been the legislative thing would have crippled us, but the IRS would have put us out of business, and we would have never survived that. The industry would have been gone.
That I can only imagine having been thrusted into that immediately. But you handle it. I got to say, Kevin, you handle it very well. So coming out of that, there's a name that you've mentioned a lot. Bill Cleese is something that you have mentioned quite a few times. And I've also understood, and maybe you can correct me on this story. Did you guys start a foundation together?
No. My wife and I started a foundation after.
Okay.
That brother of mine that was my partner, as time went on in our business, we rekindled our partnership again in the year of 2000. And in 2002, he passed away playing tennis, had a massive heart attack.
Sorry to hear that.
And so in his memory, we at the same year that happened, we had a longtime employee of ours that died from colon cancer. And so my wife and I created a golf tournament to fund a education foundation that we started. And so APRO had its own education foundation. My wife and I had another separate foundation that Dennis Shields, you mentioned about, and a lot of other dealers had, they would come out, and vendors from all over the country would come to the state of Washington to play golf, and we'd raise $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 in a day playing golf and having fun. So it was a good time. Anyways, that's a whole different deal.
Well, I do hear. I mean, I've heard about it. It still echoes in the halls of the legends, as you know, to some of the things that you've done, and the fact that a lot of the industry got behind you on this, and maybe that's where the Bill Cleese part comes in, because I know that a lot of people were talking about how this went down. Now, has the foundation changed, or has it stopped?
No, it's gone away since we retired. We don't have it anymore. We don't have the arm of the vendors and everything else that would fund it. But back to Bill Cleese. Bill Cleese is having him around at that time of the legislature part. Bill Cleese's background was he was a Texas state legislator before he became the executive director of APRO. And I'll never forget, it was either my first or second time up there in D.C. We had a meeting with a Texas legislator, in fact, and we had this meeting that Bill set up, and it was in the Democratic Club. And so this is a members only place that the Democrat members can come to have lunch. And we were having lunch there, and Bill, in fact, looked at me and said, "How do you like having lunch in the middle of the lion's den?" And anyways, it was a eye-opening experience. But because of his background and knowing some of these people, we were able to navigate through the woods and through the trees to get the right people that we needed to have that could put Gonzalez at bay and hold him completely off, which we were able to do. At the same time, on the IRS side, we found our champion in Senator Dick Shelby from Alabama. And the key to him is that he was the chairman of the Appropriations Committee to the Internal Revenue Service. So he controlled all their money. And we were contributors to Senator Shelby. Nothing in Washington, D.C. goes without money. It just anybody believes that they're in a dreamland. It just doesn't work that way. And anyways, the long and the short of it is that we become in favor with Senator Shelby, and Senator Shelby had a conversation with the commissioner of the IRS about an appropriation she needed. And he said it looked okay, but he said, "What do you know about rent to own?" The next day we got a Rev Proc ruling, which is like getting a ruling from the Supreme Court that says we're a lease, not a sale, and we're a depreciable item. And at that time, it was a 5-year property. And the president that took over after me, Mr. Bill White, took that back and got us tied to a tax bill thing that got us 3 years depreciation. So
I'm going to tell you what, that's a win.
Depreciation schedule, and it happened my last year as presidency. I kept telling Bill and Ed and everybody, I said, we got to have a win before we go to the convention. These guys are tired of cutting checks and not seeing us win anything, and it was a huge win. It was not only a huge win for APRO, a huge win for the RTO industry as a whole. Yeah. Everything that we do nowadays kind of revolves around the activities that happened during the beginning of that decade. Yes. So then you go through this, you start the foundation, you're the president, you've had you're running your stores, you've kind of accomplished a lot. And then in 2010, they said, you know what? We've got to give you an award. We've got to tell you that Kevin, you're doing an amazing job. Let's give you the Lifetime Achievement Award from APRO. How was it to receive that award from some of the people that you had been with all this time and kind of helped out in the industry? Oh, It it probably is the greatest award I've ever received. It it has two good meanings for me. One is that it's the recognition that I received, but also the gentleman that awarded it to me, who was Tiger John Cleek, and we lost Tiger a few years ago. Very good friend of mine. Anyways, sorry about that, but that meant a lot to me, and so it was a big deal. It's a big deal that I'm proud of the awards that I've won in all of them. That the ones I've gotten from APRO, I've gotten the one award you can get from the Trib Group, which is that you've dealt with Dennis, and it's a big deal. Yeah, I guess that's all I can say. It was a big deal, especially coming from Tiger. So,
well, Tiger Cleet was almost superhuman in the sense he was bigger than life when it came to the RTO industry. Somebody that a lot of people looked up to, including John Cleet Jr., who's been on the show, who's also a very good friend of the show, and I look up to. He's an amazing person. And he reveres his father a lot.
Here's an interesting thing. His father and I met in, I think it was probably 1989 or 90, on a fishing trip that Speed Queen Laundry took us all up into Canada. And he and his wife, Ann, have been good friends of Angie's and mine for years. We've followed Johnny growing up in the business. We've followed them in their grandchildren. In fact, the Cleeks came out. I don't know if you know this, but one of Johnny's children is in the spectrum and is a great golfer. And he was playing golf in the Olympics for Special Olympics in Seattle. And
wow.
The Cleeks came out, and we had him out here in Moses Lake, and then took him to Seattle, and they hosted us at Husky Stadium, which I'm a diehard Husky fan as much as John was a diehard Missouri Tiger fan. But anyways, we got to sit in our football stadium and watch his son or his grandson be part of the opening ceremony at Husky Stadium. It was pretty cool.
That's cool. Absolutely amazing.
And I guess to go with that, if there's one thing that I can say, being one of the old timers, if that's what you want to call us,
we call it legends, Kevin. Yeah, you guys are the legends.
If I was to look back, I'm getting, the older I get, the more I look back, and I've mentioned some names and quite a few of them that, they're not with us anymore. And we've got some that are today that are sick, that were legends that are not with us, and or that are still with us but have issues. And we pray for them every day that they get better, but that's in God's hands. The biggest thing that through all that is, like I said, like the Cleeks, like the Windsors, the Quinns, my daughters, we've seen this evolution of these people, and then now their children, the second generations, taking over and putting a stamp on this industry. And whether it be in the television furniture appliance business, or whether it be in the wheel and tire business, it's pretty cool to watch. I mean, this little goofy idea that was started by Bud Holliday while Ernie Talley goes on vacation to rent some washers and dryers, blows up into this thing that has lasted for, 60 plus, 70 plus years almost. And it's a multi-billion-dollar industry. And it's to be part of it in the early stages and see where it's at today is pretty cool.
Well, I got to say, Kevin, it's so important. I love to have these conversations, especially with our legends, because you guys have such a story to tell. And it's not that I haven't done anything in 20 years. I mean, I've done a lot, but my 20 years, I think, just scratches the surface of some of the things that you've been able to go through and create, be a part of, whether it be the government wise, whether it be the creating or moving of APRO from one point to another, whether it's, tackling the IRS or just getting everybody together and putting APRO back on point. It's so great to see that happen. It's so great to see some of the camaraderie of some of the legends in the industry.
And that's the other thing. Through this, we created great friendships. Like I mentioned about, John Cleek. We lost Daryl Tissett just a few months ago, and Daryl was a very good friend of mine, and I played a lot of golf with Daryl. And there's a gentleman that's been retired. He retired the same time that I did. His name is Dick Eichlin. That was part of that strategic planning meeting. He lives in Virginia. He lost his wife a few years ago, but it just so happens that here in a few days, my wife and I are going to jump in a car and drive to Deadwood, South Dakota, and meet Dick. And Dick this year will be 92 years old.
Oh, wow.
In November. And and he's probably one of my closest and dearest friends. And so how do you look at that? I mean, again, I was the young guy. So I'm the ripe old age of 68 today, and I'm talking about a 92-year-old man that's one of my closest friends. Bill Keach was much older than I am. Same thing with Ed Wynn and all that. Lynn, you mentioned Lynn Leach earlier. His father was, it used to be around during my earlier stages of being as president of APRO and so on. And my wife and I have traveled to Nebraska and gone to football games with Lynn, and they came out here, Lynn and Natalie. And so, I mean, the camaraderie that this industry has and always will have is amazing. And if you look at other industries and especially vendors, they'll tell you there's nothing like it. Nobody's ever seen anything like it. So it's pretty unique.
It is absolutely unique.
One point that I want to make to you that I know I talked to you about this on the phone that I became aware of it when Bill Keith retired down in Galveston, Texas, at our convention. Excuse me, was all that Henry B. Gonzalez stuff and the IRS and during all that time. Richard May, who was part of our legislative group at APRO too, he was one of our employees, was there, and he told me that, unbeknownst to me, a professor at Texas A&M had looked into this, what we had done, and it's part of one of his books that he teaches on about political science and how small groups can be powerful by finding the right people and knowing the right things and the right ways to go about it and do things. We're a textbook.
Case study.
We're part of a textbook, and who would have thunk that? Oh, we're just a bunch of peddlers, selling televisions and furniture. That's who we are. That's who most.
Well, Kevin, the way it works is I don't think anybody ever sets out to be great. They set out to accomplish something, and in that they find greatness. And I think that's the RTO industry. We never really set out to do anything else but be successful in what we do and try to overcome the trials and tribulations that have been set in front of us. And out of that, we've had the camaraderie, the generations, and every so often we just leap spring into something new that we didn't have before, whether it's beating the ability to have quite a few high-level names say that they didn't want rent-to-own around, or the IRS, or whether it was a banking situation. It seems that perseverance, especially with the people that are around you, when you have a lot of separate companies come together as one and unite and say, you know what, I can put down the differences of you sold my friend a VCR and this guy took my customer with. We put that aside and go, you know what? As an industry as a whole in the United States, we got from Washington, and you've mentioned right. Texas, and Tissett's from Ohio, and you're talking about the cleats from Missouri. You get them all together, and it is a force to be reckoned with to be able to stand there and really align themselves together under the APRO banner and go, we're gonna take this on one at a time and knock this out and knock this out and knock this out. And then somebody makes a case study out of it, right? And then you become the thing of legend.
It's kind of fun.
And that's it.
It's kind of interesting.
That's what this is all about.
It's a great thing to look back on and say, it's just the industry has been very, very good to my wife and I, and our children and my grandchildren. I don't know where I'd have been if it wasn't for my brother introducing me to two guys that decided to go to Texas and listen to some guy named Dennis Palmquist about how he could sell TVs this way. It just, God works in a very, very mysterious way, and we've been blessed to have that journey and ride on it. So,
well, something that I've always believed in, something that I've heard a few years ago, and it's never left me, is God bless the broken road.
Yeah, there you go.
That's what it's about. So, at the end, you've come such a long way. You're here now. Tell me a little bit before we go. You say your daughters have an R&R right now. How is that working out? How different is that from what what you did, and how are they doing?
In 2013, we weren't for sale, and we were approached by the Buddies Group in Tampa, Florida, about being part of an expansion process that eventually, I don't know how it leaked out, but it got to Rent-A-Center. And again, we still weren't for sale, and God bless us. God blessed Angie and I, it was you can't make this up, but we get two of the largest and the third largest company in the country that want to buy us, and we're not for sale, and they basically got in a bidding war over us. And so, what are you going to say? Again, back to my wife of 46 years, she says, if you don't take this deal,
you're in trouble. You're in trouble.
So we retired from that and from the rent-to-own industry at that point. Prior to that, though, we had started an R&R franchise with Larry Sutton. And the store was not doing well because I wasn't paying attention to it. I was more on the other side, and I was hoping that one of my key people would do so, and it just didn't work out very well. But long and the short of it was, the Buddies Group did not want that store. So after we sold, my daughters didn't have a job because they were part of my front office. And in fact, our oldest daughter, Courtney, was our spokesman on television and head of our advertising, and she was on all of our trucks and everything. And our youngest daughter was she was my chief. She was the head of our office. She ran everything in the office and HR and everything. So anyway, they came to us and said, Dad, can we have the wheel and tire store? Yeah, but I can't pay you. I said, there's no money there. I can't pay you. And so they took it on, and we, of course, helped them and helped them financially with the store to make it survive. They finally turned it around, paid us all of our money back that we had put into it, make themselves a decent living out of the thing. And in fact, I don't know, 5 years ago, I think it was 4 or 5 years ago, our daughters were named the Women of the Year by the R&R franchise group. And we're on 2 or 3 podcasts like you but they were talking to people about women running a tire and wheel store and what that was like, and also being sisters. And so we're very proud of them. Very proud of them.
I would be, absolutely. Yeah. As a matter of fact, we're going to have to talk about Courtney after this episode is over.
Courtney and Casey.
Casey, I'd love to get him on the show. But I really appreciate, Kevin, you being on here with me and kind of just walking me through some of the timelines. That, we've got decades of information, whether it be, the 80s or the 90s or the 2010s, and now we're here. I really appreciate you taking out the time to talk to me about it. I really appreciate you kind of going back and just filling us in on some of the things that meant a lot to the industry, not only to the industry, but to the people in the industry. Because as much as you say that there's camaraderie and there was a lot of people around there, they also say the same about you. Your name comes up in those circles as well as somebody that they really revered and still revered to this day. So, just so you know, it's not a one-way street. They say the same thing about you. And I really appreciate you being on this Legend series with me. Guys, I will tell you, I so much appreciate you being on here with the podcast. Listen, if you have any questions for Kevin or the podcast, please let me know. If you want to reach out to me on the email, it's pete@thertoshowpodcast.com, or go online to the podcast at thertoshowpodcast.com. You can go on there, see the episodes, buy some swag, support the show. You can also see us on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and YouTube, where you're going to say this. Kevin, I really appreciate having you on the show. And I'm going to tell you guys, as always, get your collections low to get your sales high. Have a great one. And that's it. That's all it is. It was